Before we begin, if you enjoy intense mafia romance stories filled with suspense and emotion, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us till the end. The first time someone else called her beautiful, the room went silent. Not because the word was rare, but because he was there. Alessandro De Luca didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He simply lifted his eyes from the glass of whiskey in his hand and looked across the room. That single look was enough to freeze blood. Men who had faced guns without blinking suddenly remembered how to breathe carefully. The man who had spoken, young, careless, drunk on confidence, smiled at her again, unaware that he had just signed his own warning. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, softer this time, leaning slightly closer. Elena felt it before she saw it, that invisible pressure, that dangerous shift in the air. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass, knuckles whitening. She didn't need to turn to know Alessandro was watching. Everyone knew the rules of De Luca territory. Everyone except outsiders. This charity gala wasn't his world. It was hers. White marble floors, crystal chandeliers, soft classical music floating through the hall. A place built on money that pretended to be clean. Elena belonged here, at least on the surface. She wore elegance like armor, a midnight blue dress, simple jewelry, hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. She was supposed to look untouchable. But Alessandro De Luca didn't believe in untouchable things. He believed in possession. "Elena," Alessandro said calmly. Her name in his voice was never just a name. It was a command, a reminder, a warning. She turned. His dark eyes met hers from across the room. No anger showed on his face. That was the most terrifying part. Alessandro's rage didn't explode, it burned. Slow, precise, deadly. "Come here." The man beside her laughed awkwardly. "Relax, man, I was just..." Alessandro finally smiled. "It wasn't friendly. I wasn't speaking to you." Two of Alessandro's men appeared silently, one on each side of the stranger. Hands firm, polite smiles, no violence, yet the message was clear: leave or be removed in ways no one would notice. The man paled. "I didn't mean any disrespect." Alessandro stood, buttoning his jacket. Tall, immaculate, dangerous in a way that didn't need noise. "You did," he replied softly, "but tonight you're lucky." The men escorted the stranger away. The music resumed. Conversations restarted, forced and uneasy, but no one truly relaxed. Elena walked toward Alessandro, every step measured. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly once they stood face to face. "Yes," he replied, eyes never leaving hers. "I did." They were close enough now that she could smell his cologne, dark, expensive, familiar. Too familiar. A scent tied to nights she tried not to remember and mornings she couldn't forget. "This is not your world," she said. "You promised you wouldn't bring your business here." "And you promised," he said, lowering his voice, "that you wouldn't forget who you belong to." Her jaw tightened. "I don't belong to anyone." His eyes flickered, not with doubt but with something sharper. "Say that again," he murmured. She didn't. Because part of her hated how safe she felt standing this close to him. How the chaos of her life always seemed to quiet when Alessandro was near. How the danger that followed him felt predictable compared to the unknowns she faced alone. They had history, too much of it. Once she had believed she could change him. Once he had almost believed it too. Almost. "You shouldn't be here," she said instead. "I go where my threats are," Alessandro replied. She scoffed. "I'm a threat now." "They called you beautiful," he said. "That makes you one." She shook her head. "You don't own compliments, Alessandro." "No," he said calmly. "I own consequences." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it once, then slipped it back into his pocket. "We're leaving," he said. "I'm not done here." "You are," he replied. There it was again, that edge, that certainty that bent rooms to his will. "This is my event," she snapped. "My donors, my reputation." "And my name keeps you alive," he said quietly. Don't forget that. The words stung because part of them were true. Elena had built her career in a city where power wore many faces. Alessandro's was the one people feared enough to respect her by association, even if they didn't know why. I won't be controlled, she said. Alessandro leaned closer, his voice just for her now. Then stop standing where men think they're allowed to look at you. Her breath caught, anger flared, but so did something else, something dangerous. You don't get to decide that, she whispered. He straightened, the moment passed, the mask returned. Enjoy your evening, he said, stepping back. But remember this, Elena. She looked up at him. In my world, he continued, attention is never innocent. Then he turned and walked away, his presence pulling his men, and the room's tension, with him. Elena stood there long after he was gone, heart racing, glass untouched. They called her beautiful. But Alessandro De Luca had called it a threat. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Elena left the gala early, the taste of unfinished conversations lingering like dust in her mouth. The city outside greeted her with cold air and restless lights, traffic humming like a warning she couldn't escape. She slid into the back seat of her car and closed her eyes for a brief moment, pressing her fingers to her temples. Alessandro's words replayed in her mind, calm and cruel all at once. Attention is never innocent. She hated how easily he unsettled her, how his presence rearranged her thoughts without asking permission. The driver pulled into traffic, unaware of the storm brewing in the back seat. Elena stared out the window, watching reflections slide across the glass. She had spent years building a life separate from Alessandro's shadow. Charity work, public appearances, careful friendships. A world that looked clean and respectable. But one look from him, and it all felt fragile, like glass waiting to crack. She wondered, not for the first time, if leaving him had ever truly meant freedom. Across the city, Alessandro stood on the balcony of his penthouse, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. Below him, the city stretched endlessly, alive and obedient. One of his men stood a respectful distance away, silent, waiting. Alessandro's jaw tightened as he replayed the scene at the gala. The way that man had looked at Elena, like she was something he could reach for, like she was unguarded. The thought twisted something dark inside him. She's being watched, Alessandro said without turning. Yes, boss, the man replied, discreetly. Good, Alessandro said. Anyone gets too close, I want to know. The man hesitated, and if she finds out? Alessandro finally turned, eyes cold. She already knows. Back in her apartment, Elena kicked off her heels and let her purse fall onto the couch. The silence pressed in on her, louder than the gala ever was. She poured herself a glass of water, hands trembling slightly, and leaned against the counter. She told herself she was angry. She told herself she was tired. She did not admit that part of her felt exposed without Alessandro nearby, like a door left unlocked in a dangerous neighborhood. Her phone buzzed. A message, unknown number. You made it home safely. Her stomach dropped. She didn't need to ask who it was. Stop this, she typed, then erased it. She stared at the screen, pulse quickening. Finally, she wrote, I don't need a guard. The reply came instantly. You need protection, whether you accept it or not. She slammed the phone down on the counter, frustration burning behind her eyes. This was how it always went. Alessandro decided. The world adjusted, and she was left fighting for space that kept shrinking. She walked to the window and pulled the curtains aside. The street below looked ordinary, too ordinary, yet she felt watched, not in a threatening way, but in a constant, unavoidable one. The next morning, the city moved on as if nothing had happened. Headlines filled screens. Meetings filled calendars. Elena dressed carefully, choosing neutral colors, hair pulled back tight. She refused to let fear dictate her life. At her office, she greeted her staff with practiced warmth and buried herself in work. For a few hours, Alessandro faded into the background, replaced by budgets, schedules, and plans for future events. Until her assistant knocked, face pale. There's someone here to see you, she said. He says it's urgent. Elena's chest tightened. Who? Before the assistant could answer, the door opened. Not Alessandro. A man she didn't recognize stepped inside, well-dressed, polite smile, eyes too sharp to be harmless. "Ms. Rossi," he said smoothly, "I won't take much of your time." Elena stood slowly. "You already are." He chuckled softly. "Fair enough. I represent people who take interest in valuable things." Her heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "I'm not interested." "Oh, I think you are," he replied, "whether you know it yet or not." Before she could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway. Alessandro's presence filled the room instantly, like a storm rolling in without warning. His gaze flicked to the stranger, then to Elena. Something dark passed through his eyes. "I believe," Alessandro said calmly, "this meeting is over." The stranger raised his hands in mock surrender. "No offense intended, just business." Alessandro stepped closer, voice low. "You're in the wrong building for that." The man studied him for a moment, then smiled thinly. "So I've heard." He turned to Elena. "You really are as beautiful as they say." Alessandro's hand moved fast. He grabbed the man's collar and shoved him against the wall, the sound sharp and final. The office froze. "I warned you," Alessandro said quietly. "Once." His men appeared as if summoned by thought alone, removing the stranger with efficiency that left no room for resistance. The door closed. Silence returned, thick and heavy. Elena stared at Alessandro, shock and fury mixing in her chest. "You had no right," she said. "I had every right," he replied. "You brought this to my office," she snapped. "My life." "No," he said. "Your beauty did." The words hit harder than she expected. "You don't get to punish the world for looking at me," she said, voice shaking. Alessandro softened, just a fraction. "I punish the world for thinking it can take what's mine." She met his gaze, anger blazing. "I am not yours." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then why do they come for you?" She had no answer. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that lines had just been crossed. Elena felt it deep in her bones. The attention was growing. The danger was real. And Alessandro, whether she wanted him or not, was already at war. They called her beautiful. Now others were starting to see her as opportunity. And Alessandro De Luca never shared what he considered his. The silence after Alessandro left her office was suffocating. Elena stood by her desk long after the door closed, her hands planted firmly on the polished wood as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Her staff pretended to work, keyboards clicking too loudly, phones ringing unnecessarily. Fear had slipped into the building like smoke, invisible but impossible to ignore. She dismissed everyone early. By the time evening fell, rain washed the city in silver streaks. Elena drove home herself, refusing the offer of an escort she knew would appear if she asked. Yet even alone in her car, she felt him everywhere. In the black SUVs that seemed to pass too often. In the way traffic lights changed just in time. Alessandro didn't need to be visible to be present. At her apartment, the power was out. The hallway lights were dead, the elevator stalled. Her pulse quickened, but she climbed the stairs anyway, heels echoing sharply in the dark. When she reached her door, she froze. It was unlocked. She pushed it open slowly. Candlelight flickered inside. "Don't scream," Alessandro's voice said calmly. "You're safe." She closed her eyes briefly, anger flaring hotter than fear. "You broke into my home." "I used my key," he replied. "I took it back." "You took a copy," he corrected. She stepped inside, dropping her bag with a sharp motion. "Get out." Alessandro stood near the window, rain tracing patterns on the glass behind him. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled up, dark hair slightly damp. He looked too comfortable, too certain. "We need to talk," he said. "No," she replied. "You need to leave." He didn't move. The man today wasn't alone. Her breath caught despite herself. "They're testing boundaries," Alessandro continued, "seeing how close they can get to you." "I can handle myself," she said, though the words sounded thin even to her. He turned to face her fully. "You shouldn't have to." "There it is," she snapped. "The excuse." "This isn't about control," he said quietly. It's about survival. She laughed bitterly. In your world, maybe. In mine, this is intimidation. He stepped closer, careful, like approaching something fragile. Your world doesn't exist without mine protecting it. That's not protection, she said. That's a cage. And yet, he replied softly, you're still alive inside it. The power came back on suddenly, lights flooding the apartment. The illusion of calm shattered. Elena crossed her arms, forcing distance between them. I won't live like this, she said. Watched, guarded, owned. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Then stop attracting attention. She stared at him in disbelief. You're blaming me. I'm stating a fact, he replied. You stand out, you always have. That's not a crime. In my world, he said, it's a liability. She took a shaky breath. Then maybe I don't belong in your world. For a moment, something like pain flickered across his face, gone before she could be sure. You left once, he said. Look where it got you. She flinched. Memories surged. Late nights, whispered promises, blood on his knuckles, her hands shaking as she cleaned them. Loving Alessandro had never been gentle. Leaving him had been worse. I built something real, she said. Something clean. And they noticed, he replied. That's the problem. She turned away, pressing her palms to the counter. What do you want from me? To move, he said simply. She spun around. What? Somewhere safer, he continued, until this dies down. I won't disappear because you say so. You won't disappear, he said. You'll be protected. By you. Yes. She shook her head. That's not safety, that's surrender. Alessandro stepped closer, his voice dropping. You think the men circling you now will stop because you say no, because you believe in boundaries. She didn't answer. They see you as leverage, he continued, as weakness. I am not weak. I know, he said. That's why they want you. The truth settled heavily between them. Elena felt it then, the shift. This wasn't just about jealousy. This was about power, about enemies she couldn't see and games she didn't know the rules to. Who are they? She asked quietly. Alessandro hesitated. People who don't forgive easily. Her stomach dropped. Because of you. Yes. Then this is your mess, she said, not mine. It became yours the moment they noticed you, he replied. She closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. I won't run. I didn't ask you to, he said. I asked you to trust me. She laughed softly, without humor. That's the one thing you destroyed. He reached out, stopping just short of touching her. I never lied about who I was. No, she whispered. You just let me believe I was different. Silence stretched. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant. I'll double security, Alessandro said finally. Here, at your office. I don't want armed men following me. They won't be obvious. They always are. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You're running out of options. So are you, she replied, because I won't be your hostage. His eyes darkened. You never were. Then stop treating me like one. A phone buzzed. Alessandro glanced at it, his expression sharpening. It's starting, he said. Her heart raced. What is? They made their next move. Before she could ask, the window behind him shattered. Glass exploded inward. Alessandro moved instantly, grabbing her and pulling her down as alarms screamed and rain poured through the broken frame. He covered her with his body, shielding her without hesitation. She clutched his jacket, breath ragged. Fear burned through her veins. Outside, engines roared, tires screeching away. When it was over, Alessandro slowly lifted his head. His face was hard now, focused, deadly. Now, he said quietly, you understand. Elena stared at the broken window, at the life she had tried to keep separate now lying in shards across her floor. They called her beautiful. But tonight, beauty had made her a target. And the cage around her was closing fast. The apartment smelled like rain, shattered glass, and something sharper, fear. Elena sat wrapped in a blanket on the couch, while Alessandro's men moved silently around the room, checking corners, speaking into earpieces, securing what had already been violated. The broken window had been boarded temporarily, rain still dripping in thin lines down the plastic covering. Sirens wailed in the distance but never came close enough to matter. Alessandro crouched in front of her, his suit jacket discarded, a thin cut along his forearm where glass had grazed him. He didn't seem to notice it. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, throat tight. "They shot at me." "They warned you," he replied. "Next time they won't." She hugged the blanket tighter. "You said protection. This doesn't feel like it." He didn't argue. "Pack a bag." "No," she said immediately. "Elena," he warned, voice low. "I said no." She repeated, forcing strength into her tone. "I won't be moved like cargo." His eyes flashed. "This isn't a negotiation." She met his stare, fear still trembling beneath her skin, but anger burning hotter. "You don't get to decide everything." For a long moment, neither of them moved. His men pretended not to listen, though every muscle was alert. Finally, Alessandro exhaled slowly. "Then you come with me, on your terms." Her heart skipped. "Where?" "Somewhere secure," he said. "Not a cage, a fortress." "That sounds worse." He almost smiled. "At least I'm honest." Within the hour, Elena stood in the underground garage, the city above her feeling distant and unreal. The black car waiting there looked like every other car Alessandro owned, silent, powerful, unquestioning. She hesitated before getting in. "This doesn't mean I forgive you," she said. "It means you live," he replied. The drive was long. They left the city behind, lights thinning into darkness. Elena watched the skyline disappear, feeling as though she were crossing a line she'd sworn never to step over again. Alessandro sat beside her, phone pressed to his ear, issuing quiet orders. His world moved around him effortlessly, violently efficient. When they arrived, dawn was breaking. The estate rose from the hills like something out of another century. High walls, iron gates, stone that had seen wars and survived them. Guards nodded as the car passed through, weapons visible but controlled. This was not a hideout. This was a statement. "This is where you hide?" Elena asked. "This is where I rule," Alessandro replied. Inside, the air was cool and still. The house was vast but not cold, filled with dark wood, old art, and the weight of history. Elena felt small and exposed all at once. A woman approached, older, composed, eyes sharp with understanding. "I'll show you to your room," she said gently. "My room," Elena echoed. "Yes," Alessandro said. "You'll be staying." The door closed behind her later, silence settling heavily. The room was beautiful, balcony overlooking the valley, sunlight spilling across the floor. Luxury meant to soften captivity. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd surrendered ground. Hours later, she wandered into the courtyard, needing air. Alessandro stood there, speaking with two men. Their conversation stopped when they saw her. She felt their eyes linger, assessing, calculating, not desire, strategy. She hated that more. "Who are they?" she asked once they were alone. "People who answer to me," he said. "And the ones who shot at me." "People who don't," he replied. She leaned against the stone railing. "Tell me the truth." He studied her face. "If I do, you won't like it." "Try me." "They want leverage," Alessandro said, "and you're the cleanest thing I have." Her stomach twisted. "So this is my fault." "No," he said sharply. "It's my weakness." The admission stunned her. "I've never let anyone be this visible," he continued. "You are different." She laughed softly. "That's what you said before everything went wrong." His gaze softened, dangerous and familiar. "It went wrong when you left." "Because I refused to drown with you." "And now you're back," he said, "whether you wanted to be or not." She turned to face him fully. "What happens to people who get in your way?" He didn't hesitate. "They don't get up again." Fear prickled her spine. "Is that supposed to make me feel safe?" It's supposed to make you feel honest, he replied. A gunshot echoed in the distance. Not close, but not far enough. Alessandro's head snapped up. His men moved instantly. Radios crackled. Stay here, he ordered. She grabbed his arm. What's happening? They're testing the perimeter, he said, seeing how close they can get. She swallowed hard. And if they get in? They won't. And if they do? His eyes met hers, dark and unwavering. Then there will be blood. The words settled between them like a promise. Night fell heavily over the estate. Elena lay awake, listening to footsteps outside her door, to the quiet murmur of guards changing shifts. Safety wrapped around her like a heavy blanket she couldn't escape. Alessandro's world was efficient, controlled, ruthless, and it was now hers too. Near midnight, her door opened quietly. She sat up, heart racing. Alessandro stood there, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. Neither should you, he replied. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The tension between them thickened, charged with things unsaid. This isn't over, she said. No, he agreed. It's just begun. She looked at him, this man who had ruined her peace and saved her life in the same breath. You'll regret bringing me here, she said. His lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. I already do. Outside, beyond the walls, enemies watched and waited. Inside, lines had been drawn. And Elena was standing in the middle of a war written in blood. Morning came slowly over the estate, pale light creeping across stone walls and guarded corridors. Elena woke to the distant sound of boots on gravel and low voices exchanging coded phrases. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality settled in, thick, heavy, unavoidable. This wasn't a visit. This was containment dressed as concern. She dressed carefully, choosing comfort over elegance, and stepped onto the balcony. The valley below looked peaceful, almost innocent, as if nothing violent could ever reach it. She wondered how many people had believed the same thing before learning otherwise. Behind her, the door opened. You didn't sleep, Alessandro said. She didn't turn. Neither did you. He joined her at the railing, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not touching. That space between them had become deliberate, careful. There was movement near the North Road last night, he said. We shut it down. Her fingers tightened on the stone. You say that like it was nothing. To me, it is, he replied. It won't be to you if they get closer. She finally looked at him. How long do you plan to keep me here? He met her gaze steadily. Until it's over. And when is that? She asked. When they stop trying to reach you, he said. Or when I remove their reason. Her stomach turned. You mean killing them? I mean ending the threat, he replied evenly. She shook her head. You talk about lives like they're transactions. In my world they are, he said, and you knew that once. I hoped you changed, she whispered. His expression tightened. I hoped you'd stay. The words hung between them, fragile and sharp. She turned away again, unable to trust herself to speak. Later that day, Alessandro insisted she sit in on a meeting. Long table. Maps, screens, men who looked at her with professional detachment. She felt like a symbol, not a person, something valuable that needed guarding. They won't come through the east, one man said. Too obvious. They don't need obvious, Alessandro replied. They need access. His eyes flicked briefly to Elena. She stiffened. What does that mean? It means, he said calmly, they may try to reach you indirectly. Her chest tightened. Through who? Anyone you trust, he answered. Silence followed. Elena stood abruptly. This is insane. It's reality, Alessandro said. Sit. She didn't. You're turning everyone in my life into a suspect. They already are, he replied, whether you want them to be or not. She left the room before he could stop her, anger buzzing under her skin. She walked the grounds aimlessly until she found herself near the outer garden, where one guard stood watch alone. He nodded respectfully. Quiet day, she said. more to fill the silence than anything else. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. The word made her flinch. That evening, a package arrived. No return address, no note. Inside was her old phone, the one she'd lost years ago, the one she thought was gone forever. Her breath caught as she turned it over in her hands. Alessandro was with her instantly. "Where did this come from?" he demanded. "I don't know," she said honestly. His face darkened. "This is how they do it." "Do what?" "Remind you," he said, "of who you were without me." She looked at the phone again, memories flooding back, freedom, fear, hope. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." "It is if it gets you killed," he snapped. She bristled. "You don't get to erase my past because it scares you." He took a breath, controlling himself. "Your past is how they'll get to you." "Or how I'll survive," she countered. That night, Elena turned the phone on. It still worked. There was one unread message. "I know where you are." Her blood ran cold. Before she could react, the power cut out. Alarms screamed. Shouting filled the corridors. Alessandro burst into the room, gun already in hand. "Stay behind me." "What's happening?" she demanded. "They're inside," he said. Gunfire echoed through the estate, not close, but getting closer. Alessandro moved with terrifying precision, issuing orders as he went. Elena followed despite herself, adrenaline burning through fear. They reached a secure hallway when a scream rang out from the garden. Elena froze. That voice. The lone guard from earlier stumbled into view, clutching his side, blood dark against his uniform. He collapsed. Before Alessandro could react, another figure stepped from the shadows. A woman. Well-dressed, calm, smiling faintly. "Elena," she said warmly. "It's been a long time." Elena stared in disbelief. Mara. Her former colleague, friend, someone she had trusted completely. Alessandro raised his gun. "Step back." Mara ignored him. "You always did choose dangerous men." "You did this," Elena whispered. Mara shrugged. "I warned you once, you didn't listen." "You sold me," Elena said, voice breaking. "I leveraged you," Mara corrected. "There's a difference." Alessandro moved forward, fury radiating off him. "You walk away now, or you don't walk at all." Mara's smile didn't falter. "You already lost, Alessandro. She'll never trust you again." Elena felt the truth of it cut deep. This war wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside her, in every choice, every memory. Mara stepped back into the darkness as guards closed in, disappearing as suddenly as she had appeared. The estate fell quiet again. Elena sank against the wall, shaking. "They used my life against me," she said softly. Alessandro knelt in front of her, eyes fierce but steady. "And I'll end them for it." She looked at him, this man who protected her with violence and truth in equal measure. "After this," she said, "nothing will be the same." He nodded. "It never is." Above them, the estate lights flickered back on. The threat was no longer distant. It had a face. And the cost of protection had just become personal. The estate did not sleep after that night. Neither did Elena. Dawn arrived wrapped in fog, clinging to the hills like a warning that refused to lift. Elena sat at the small table in her room, staring at the old phone lying in front of her as if it might speak again. Mara's face kept appearing in her mind, calm, familiar, betrayed. The realization hurt more than the gunfire. The danger had not come from strangers in the dark, but from someone who had once stood beside her in the light. A knock sounded. Alessandro entered without waiting for permission. He looked different this morning, harder, more distant. War had settled into his posture. "We tracked her," he said. Elena's chest tightened. "Mara." "Yes," he replied. "She won't get far." Elena stood slowly. "You're going to kill her." Alessandro didn't deny it. "She crossed a line." "So did you," Elena said quietly. "Every time you decided for me." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "I decided to keep you alive." "And what's left of me after that?" she asked. What part of my life isn't collateral damage? Silence stretched between them. She knew my past. Elena continued. She knew where I came from. That's how she found me. And she sold that information, Alessandro said coldly. That's why this ends today. Elena shook her head. You think ending her ends this? It ends the message, he replied. She took a breath. Then I'm coming with you. His eyes snapped up. No. I won't stay here wondering what you've done in my name, she said. If this finishes, it finishes with me watching. For a moment, he looked ready to refuse. Then he nodded once. Stay close, he said, and do exactly what I say. They left the estate in a convoy that cut through the fog like a blade. Elena sat beside Alessandro, hands folded tightly in her lap, heart pounding. She had never seen this side of his world so openly before. No pretenses, no distance, just intention. The warehouse stood alone at the edge of an abandoned industrial zone. Rusted steel, broken windows, silence that felt staged. Alessandro's men surrounded it with practiced ease. Inside, the air smelled of oil and damp concrete. Mara stood waiting. She didn't look afraid. That hurt the most. Elena, Mara said softly, you came. I needed to see you, Elena replied. I needed to understand why. Mara smiled sadly. You always wanted explanations. Alessandro raised his gun. This is over. Is it? Mara asked. Because the moment you pulled her back into your world, you signed her death warrant. Elena stepped forward despite Alessandro's hand tightening on her arm. You used me. Yes, Mara said, because they'd listen if I brought them something valuable. Elena's voice trembled. I trusted you. I warned you, Mara replied. Power like his doesn't let go. Alessandro spoke then, voice calm and lethal. You're done talking. Mara's gaze flicked to Elena one last time. You think he's protecting you, but you are the threat now. Everyone sees it. The words echoed painfully true. Alessandro fired. It was quick, final, no drama. Elena flinched as Mara collapsed, the sound of her body hitting the floor louder than the gunshot itself. Something inside her broke quietly, not shock, acceptance. The men moved to clear the scene, efficient and silent. Elena turned to Alessandro. This doesn't end it. He lowered the gun. It ends this. Outside, the fog began to lift. They returned to the estate in silence. When they arrived, Elena didn't go inside. She stopped at the gates, breathing deeply. I can't stay here, she said. Alessandro closed the door behind him. You're not safe out there. I'll never be safe anywhere you are, she replied. Not because you're dangerous, but because your world sees me now. He studied her face. They see you as mine. That's the problem, she said. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, what do you want? The question surprised her. I want my life, she said. Not hidden, not guarded, mine. He nodded slowly. Then you leave under my protection, not my control. And you, she asked. I handle the fallout, he said. I always do. She stepped closer, voice soft. You'll never stop watching. No, he admitted, but I won't cage you again. They stood there, the weight of everything they'd been through pressing down on them. Love, fear, history, tangled beyond repair. They called me beautiful, Elena said, and it turned me into a target. Alessandro met her eyes. They called you beautiful, he replied. I called you a threat because you were the one thing that could destroy me. She understood then, not possession, not jealousy alone. Fear. She reached up and pressed a hand briefly to his chest. Goodbye, Alessandro. He didn't stop her. Elena walked through the gates alone, the morning light finally clear, the road ahead uncertain but hers. Behind her, Alessandro De Luca stood still, watching the only woman who had ever made his power feel fragile. They called her beautiful. He had called it a threat. And in the end, she became the one thing he chose not to own.